All right. Okay, everyone. Here we go again. Thank y'all again for being here today. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Shirley Smelly. We have a background, a history. I remember her a whole lot more than she remembers me. This is way back at Northside Baptist Church in Weatherford. We were members there for years and years and years before we came here. And her parents were good friends of ours. Don, her dad, and I taught Sunday school together. And we were good friends. Anyway, we knew the family real well. But and they just Don and Shirley just had their 90th anniversary birthday celebration just last weekend, right?
No, yesterday.
Yesterday. So that's fantastic. But so we have a history. But we're so glad to have Shirley here today. As a lifelong resident of Parker County and a private business owner for 17 years, Shirley, in 2009, felt led to enter into the field of healthcare. Her passion was and is to help the elderly. In fact, elder care is the title of her presentation. Their families at a difficult time in their lives. In 2009, Shirley joined the staff of Martin Crest Assisting Living and Memory Care in Weatherford. And where is that? I'm not sure where that is.
On Martin Drive.
Oh, I know where that is. Okay, all right. God then asked her to take another step of faith and broaden her passion by joining Integra Hair Hospice, where she remained for the next 5 years. For 7 years now, she has worked with Aviator Home Care. My voice is just starting to go everywhere now. Aviator Home Health Group, assisting families with their expertise in independent living, assisted living, memory care facilities, rehab facilities, and rehab hospitals. And so navigating retirement communities, we're so glad to have Shirley here today. Would you help me welcome her today?
Goodness, I sound like I'm old. I know, right? I love what I do. I love helping people understand the process. I love all the different varying facets of it. It's almost like a puzzle piece to me, and I like trying to help solve that. So been working in home health care now for the last 7 years, but I've had all of the different various organizations in my roles, my different roles throughout my older part of my life. But I was very honored and blessed that they asked me to come and be able to share with you all the different aspects of it. So if I start rambling, I'll bring it back in, I promise. I'm going to kind of talk about how everything is kind of intertwined. I know right here I've got, prepare and plan, POA, MPOA, y'all know what that is, right? Will, DNR, estate planning, VA benefits, and long-term care insurance, and I forgot an S there, sorry. Know your options, doctors in network, inpatient, rehabilitation hospital, and skilled nursing rehab. These are all different types of facilities that going through different life stages you may need, and being able to know, one, what your insurance is going to allow, two, knowing what facility is going to take your insurance, and kind of knowing the amount of days that your loved one could be there. I say all of this to be prepared and plan, and it sounds kind of silly, but if you don't know all of that, then when you get into that situation, we don't ever know when that is, then you're kind of going, well, what's the next step? Where do I go from here? What's the difference between an inpatient hospital and a rehab hospital? Well, I want to go to this inpatient rehab hospital. Well, just because you want to go there doesn't mean that you're going to be able to go there. So we're going to kind of touch on all of that, and then the continuity of care, all of those different aspects. And then I'm going to take questions at the end, so we can talk about whatever and any questions that you have after that. And I apologize, I don't know what between here and there, we got the top chopped off. So he's already covered that. So I know that y'all have probably been going through a lot of learning about what you need. I say POA, medical power of attorney. You need all of these. I already have mine. I already have it. I've got it in an envelope. I don't have any kids. I have a nephew that is pretty much like my kid, so he knows where exactly that is. I have a will. I have all of that already prepared and ready to go. Because, again, we don't have a crystal ball. I employ everybody to get that, to know your wishes of your loved one, so people will know what your wishes are. Estate planning. Who's going to be the executor of your will? Who's going to be the person in charge? Like with our family, we have 4 daughters. Well, my parents have 4 daughters. One passed away in '88, but they did their first will. I think the date on it was in the '70s, and we were like, no, we've got to get this up to date because a lot's changed. So having something current is very important too. And the reason why that's all important, and if you've had any kind of, he was talking about his wife having surgery, you probably had to provide a POA, medical power of attorney, a DNR, or an out-of-hospital DNR. I don't know if you had to get those. Most hospitals require like a DNR on hand. Yeah. And so those are all great to have. Also in the estate planning, I talk about that mainly because eventually you're going to go through all of those different continuums of care, and you're going to need to know what your options are as far as long-term care, what your finances are, if you've got like a trust fund, all of those things. That's just good to have. And you need to know that before you start looking at your placements. VA benefits. Did y'all have somebody talk to y'all about that? The VA?
Not particularly.
Okay. VA benefits is something that a lot of people don't talk about or you're unaware of, but this is something that benefits for long-term care facilities, assisted livings that we're going to talk about. But VA benefits are something that will provide some extra income to help pay and cover for your assisted living or your long-term care facilities. Those are all something that is really good to know that you have. But most of all of the counties, I know down at Parker County, they have a VA benefit gentleman that helps with that. Stacks about this thick. Don't get intimidated by it because he'll help you and walk you through all of that process. But generally, that's something that you can utilize for a veteran. But the biggest thing is that they had to serve in a wartime period with boots on the ground. That's the biggest part. So if you have a loved one that served during that type of wartime period, look into those benefits because that's something that can help pay for their care. Long-term care insurance, that's something else that that's beyond your health insurance. That's something that can take care of your private duty care that can come into the home and help cook, clean. All of those things can be helped covered, maybe not 100%, but could be helped covered by some of that. Do you know whether or not your loved one has that? That's something when we were trying to take care of my aunt that didn't have any loved ones. We didn't know what she had, what she didn't have. We had no idea what type of insurance that she had. We had to go through bank statements and look to see what was auto draft out of her bank statement to know that she even had a long-term care policy. So those are all things that I say be prepared. Know who your doctors can take the insurance. Know that, okay, well, my PCP takes this insurance. If he's going to refer you out to a cardiologist or a gerontologist that y'all were speaking of, those are all things. Well, do you know whether or not they take this Medicare Advantage plan? Most all doctors take a Medicare, the traditional Medicare. I talk about that a lot because you have more options with your traditional Medicare. Whereas Medicare Advantage plans, they generally have like a lump group over here that they can cover with their insurance. So it's good to know. Like with Clear Sky, I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's an inpatient unit in Weatherford. They only take certain Medicare Advantage plans. They don't take all of them. But every one of the inpatient unit rehab facilities all take traditional Medicare. That's my little plug on that. So knowing your options, and it talks about your Medicare Advantage plans, don't assume all of them are the same. How many have gone to a hospital or a doctor and then come to find out that your insurance didn't cover it? Anybody? Back in the back. It's quite alarming, isn't it? So I always say be prepared, know those. Don't rely on calling just your insurance company. For us, whenever we have home health, and we take a lot of different insurances. And when people call, let's say, United Healthcare, and they call United Healthcare and they say, does Aviator Home Health, do they take United Healthcare Medicare Advantage plans? Yes, we do. But there's 7 different Medicare Advantage plans. We don't take all of those 7 Medicare Advantage plans. So I say call the facility or call your doctor and find that out. Same with the skilled nursing facility, because those are different, which we're going to get to here in the next slide. All of the ones there in Weatherford and even Springtown Park here, they're going to take a various amount of Medicare Advantage plans, but I know that they don't take Humana. So if you've got Humana insurance or a Humana Medicare Advantage plan, you can't go to Springtown Park. So knowing which facility you could go to when you have a hip replacement or some procedure, to know that's always good to know. And that's the inpatient unit, rehab hospital, and the skilled nursing facilities. I know that was something that we didn't necessarily talk about, but when something actually happens and you need to go to an inpatient rehab facility, those two are totally different. And your length of stays and your capabilities of participation in the rehab is the difference. Okay, so your inpatient unit rehab or inpatient rehab hospital, when you go there day one, you're going to be able to have to participate for 3 hours of rehab. Okay, I mean, you're going, and they're going to put you on those machines and start working you out. So know that. Also, that you have a 12-day max stay at the inpatient rehab hospital. And so a skilled nursing facility, inpatient rehab hospital, that's like Springtown Park Rehab and Care Center, you can work up to 3 hours of rehab per day. So when people say, oh, well, I want to go to the one that's going to be able to do 3 hours of rehab per day, are you going to be able to do that like tomorrow, or are you going to be able to work into that? And that's something that the hospital that you're at, or the surgery center, the social workers or the case managers would be able to communicate with the doctors and tell you what that length of stay, or not length of stay, how many hours he wants you working on that. Because sometimes what we want to do and what the doctor wants us to do, depending on the procedure that he had, that's something that will be determined at that point. So now we're going to talk about the differences of your private duty home care, home health. Big difference. A lot of people think that private duty home care is us, home health. Big difference. It's a non-skilled need not covered by your medical insurance. It's paid out of pocket unless the patient has long-term insurance or VA benefits. And know that both your long-term care insurance and your VA benefits, you have a vesting period. And that's generally between 60 and 90 days. And that's where you pay out of pocket before they pick that up. Okay? Private duty home caregivers, those are people that can sit with your loved one, like with Shelley, with the Alzheimer's, with dementia. If you've got a loved one that's with you, that you're the caregiver, the primary caregiver, that's where you need to go to the grocery store, or you need to go shopping for your house or your daily needs, where they could come in and sit with your loved one for how many ever hours you need. And the payment, which that's private duty, paid out of pocket, that can range anywhere from $20 to $30 an hour. And that is with a licensed and bonded company. And I recommend those because those have been filed with the state. They also pay taxes in with the state. But if something were to happen, let's say that they hired a caregiver that came into your house and stole from you, their insurance is going to cover that. So if you just have somebody off of the internet that said that they're going to come in and sit with mama for 2 hours and you're going to pay them $15 an hour, yeah, it's cheaper, but don't know them. I mean, don't know them from Adam, and they could still, and that's a lot of times what happens, which is super sad, that people will take advantage of the elderly. And that's where I'm talking about licensed and bonded. Does that all make sense so far? Home health care. So that's what I do. And we can come into the home, whatever the patient calls home. And so if your mom or your dad's living with you, we can come into the house and provide skilled nursing, that's a RN, PT, OT, ST, and that's covered by your insurance. And that's going to be either with traditional Medicare or Medicare Advantages or commercial insurance. That's where your insurance covers it, because there is a skilled need, and that is just like a prescription that a doctor or a hospitalist has to write out in order to get it. Can't just call us and say, hey, I want some rehab in my house. But we can do this in an assisted living and independent living and in your home. So we can do those on all the different places wherever the patient calls home. Hospice care is the same thing. And I've talked a little bit about that because we have done hospice, and I know y'all have a speaker coming next week talking about hospice. It's a tremendous benefit that is covered by Medicare and your insurance. This is end of life. This is patient that doesn't necessarily have to be actively dying, but they can progress and be tomorrow, because we don't know when God's going to call us home. But definitely we don't know what that time and place is. So we've had patients on hospice for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So that's wonderful benefit that Medicare covers. The biggest difference is when you're not seeking curative measures. So home health, we're seeking curative measures. We're actively trying to help the patient reach a goal. Hospice is we want to take care of them comfortably and keep them out of pain. And we want to also be able to help the family navigate through that time. And that's hospice care. And we can do this too in the assisted living, independent living, SNF, and hospital. And I've asterisked there because hospice care in an ALF, independent living, and SNF, that's the skilled nursing facility, that covers the care, but it doesn't cover the cost. So it's just like if hospice comes into your home, you're still paying your mortgage if you still got a mortgage out there. So you're still going to have that overhead. Okay? Does that make sense a little bit? No? Yes? Okay. Just making sure. I like to asterisk that because that was always one thing that, but we're going to be on hospice or home health. Doesn't that cover the cost or the overhead? It does. It does not. So independent living. And I know Springtown still has some independent apartments. Is it still ran here, right? Yeah. And then I know also Azle has some and Weatherford has some. This is where basically, I mean, I see several every year. You don't have to have an age limit. Generally, it's 55 and older. I can qualify. Praise God. They just wouldn't take me or my dogs. But do what? Most of them will take one, but I don't have just one. So most of the places with independent living, and there's various types. You have some that I believe Legends over in Azle, they will provide or include one meal, whether that's like breakfast or dinner, which that's like at 4:30 or 5, and a lot of them will provide that. But they also have kitchens or kitchenettes in the apartments too. So if you still want to cook, so if I lived in there and I still wanted to cook, I could still cook. They don't have, or a lot of them do not have staff on call, like that's going to give out meds, or if they fall, something like that, they're not checking on you all the time, because it's just like an apartment. You're living in your own apartment. You're just basically paying rent to somebody, but there's various different types of these, and the rent on those can start around $1,200, and that's probably pretty much base, where it's just your apartment, and you can go up to $2,400 a month. And I say depending on the amenities, because some of them are fancy smancy, and they provide like exercise. They're going to provide 3 meals a day. They're going to do activities. They just may do more the higher of the level that you go with independent living. And some of them are just like a cruise ship on ground. I mean, they'll do everything there for you. You're paying for that though. I put on the asterisk too, low income based housing may be found in some cities, but are very few. That goes back to be prepared. So if you know that you're not going to be able to afford in that price range per month, know where those low income apartments are. Get on the list, because a lot of them have a long waiting list. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah, it's great for that. And so it's wonderful to be able to know what is available out there for you whenever that time comes. So ask around, know where you want to go. Assisted living. So this is like a community under a roof. Um, Many different apartments. They're going to range. Some of them are pretty small, from 30. Some of them go up to 120. When you start looking for these, I say some of them are all inclusive, and some of them are concierge, or they pay by service. That's concierge. So whenever you start looking at these, that's a good question to ask. Is it all inclusive? Is the care all inclusive? Is it concierge? So if I move into an assisted living and I am only going to need my medicines given to me, they may consider that as like a level 1. So if it's all inclusive, they're going to go up with you on your different levels of care. So if you're going to need med management, but they also know that you're a fall risk and you need to be checked on one time an hour, that's also going to be in those levels. If you need assistant showering or dressing, that's in those levels. So those are all good questions to ask. What's included with your assisted living? They also have on staff typically an RN or an LVN, that is your wellness director. Caregivers that work there work underneath your wellness director. So our state laws don't require them at this moment. That's something that I know that is being talked about, because they want like a CNA to be required to work in the assisted livings, because they're handing out medications, they're helping people shower. Caregivers and CNAs are totally different. So whenever you go to the assisted livings, they're not required to have a licensed certified nursing assistant on staff. They're caregivers. Does that make sense? So the people that would be helping your mama and daddy, they may not have any kind of medical training, nor do they know the difference between Seroquel or levothyroxine for a thyroid medication. They don't know the difference. They might think they do, but they don't really have that education. Yes, sir.
Is that also the same for the private duty care people? Licensed and bonded, they don't necessarily, what training do they have?
It depends on the company. And, if you just get somebody that you meet off the internet that's going to come in, they're not required by state. Now, if you have a company that is charging the $20 to $30, and that's why that's typically higher, is because they are licensed, bonded, and they're trained, they're background checked. There's a little bit more in-depth training in that. Generally, like there's one particular company in Weatherford that actually will only hire CNAs, certified nursing aides. I know of 2 other companies that I'm not going to name. They do not. They train themselves, because that's something else that's not required by the state to run that company. Yes, very important. I mean, and whenever you start interviewing these people, and that's exactly what I would say. Interview them, sit down, talk to them, find out what they know. Find out, hey, are your caregivers, are they CNAs? What training do they have? What's their background? Most assisted livings do a background check, but some of them do not. So that is something that, but it's true. There's just not a whole lot of regulations on this. I mean, I know just recently, which was horrifying, was out of Dallas, and it was at an assisted living where a gentleman was working in one, and he literally sold from several ladies, and the ladies died. And he was not certified or licensed for anything. So it's good to know what you've got in there taking care of mama and daddy or yourself. I also talk on this, and this is going to be for assisted living, independent living, and memory care. When you're calling around and you're finding out, because that's typically our first step, we call around and we find out what our price is. What's our budget? You know, where are we going to be able to afford? So most of them, because I work there, when can you come in? When can I set this up? Let me schedule that appointment. Don't do it. Drop in. And I do that and I say that because you want to get a look and smell of that building whenever nobody's visiting. That's right. That's right. You want to look and see what the food looks like. You want to see how clean the residents are. You want to see if somebody's walking around soiled and they're not getting taken care of. Do we have care staff that's yelling at another lady in the corner? Those are all important things. You're the only advocate that you've got for your loved one. You're it. And be active. Go in there. Pop in at different times. Don't just come in at dinner at night, because those care staff knows who's coming and going generally if they have a pretty good routine. So they'll make sure mama and daddy is cleaned up and looking good if you come in at 5 o'clock every day. So don't call, pop in for a tour set up. Definitely you can call and get your price ranges, because they're all going to be pretty expensive on the assisted living, because remember, you're looking at levels of care. Is it all inclusive, or is it going to be a concierge service that they add on whenever that level of care changes? So that's a great question to ask. Another question that I would definitely ask is, how often do you go up on your rent? How often does that change? Typically that's yearly, and it's typical right around January. How much do you go up? Is it 3%? Is it 2%? 1%? They generally know. Yeah, and I would ask what it was. When was your last price increase? There's a lot of them, and costs, just probably in the last year, it has probably gone to a 4%, just because of your food cost and your drink costs and services or food services that are coming in. That's increased, so that's going to vary. So that's a great question to ask. Covered all that. Memory care, and most of the ones that are around here, they all have it encompassed in one. I know, like with Martin Crest, with West Fork, with Clear Fork, they have an assisted living, and they also have the memory care. That's all under one roof. And your difference is a locked door, and they generally have a code. Those are good for several different reasons. One, whenever you get into the course of dementia or Alzheimer's, just seeing the same or similar decor can make a huge difference in that transition. If it's completely different from moving from home to an assisted living, just that little bit of change can confuse a loved one that has a little bit of dementia or Alzheimer's, but just that change and transition into an assisted living or independent living from the home can cause some acceleration, just in confusion. Yes, ma'am.
I think one other thing too that you have to be aware of is that a lot of times the doctor's going to recommend a facility, but at the same time, a lot of facilities don't have open beds. And you may not get the type of facility you think you're getting because, there wasn't any open beds.
Mm-hmm.
It was put into a couple of facilities from this doctor, only because they had a bed.
Mm-hmm.
They were not facilities that I would be.
Yeah.
You're pigeonholed because you have the doctor's orders that send him there. And then, I could take him out, but I could not really get anything.
One or two things here. Either the doctor owned that facility and that's where he wanted him to go because he was getting a portion of that, and I'm not trying to speak ill will of that. But you're seeing a lot of more physicians that are getting involved with assisted livings, rehabs, inpatient hospital units, just because there's money in it. And there's way more money in it than there is their practice. I promise you.
At the same time, I think you have to be aware of that. And two, if the doctor doesn't want to give the orders anywhere else.
Well, in assisted livings, you don't have to have an order per se to go into the assisted living. You have to have a doctor that writes out what their medication list is, what their diagnoses are, but they don't have to actually have an order, like a prescription, to move in there.
That brings up another question about, you have to have guardianship. Because I butted into that.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor's orders put him in a facility. They would not accept it under my medical order.
What facility was that?
It was over in Fort Worth. It was over in South Fort Worth.
What was the name of it?
It was a little facility off of Old Granbury Road, around in there.
That actually sounds, was it Watermere?
No, I'm not sure. It was late at night. I was having a bad issue with him, and I had a RN friend that suggested I might try to get him admitted there. But they would not take my medical power of attorney. They would not take anything except a guardianship. So before I could even admit him overnight.
That doesn't even sound right.
Well, it was right, because I ended up taking him to the hospital, and the hospital said they would send the orders over to admit him. But that also brought up the situation where if he could sit there, even though he was diagnosed with, Lewy body dementia,
Mhm.
he didn't know me at all. He was trying to go out the window of the house.
I know what you're talking about now. That's a memory care unit.
And what happened was, he sat there and said, no, I don't want to stay here.
Yeah.
And they said, we can't do anything unless you have guardianship.
What about the medical power of attorney? Were you the spouse?
I'm a spouse, I was a spouse.
And you couldn't admit him?
No, I could not admit it, because he sat there and said he didn't want to stay. And it's like, look at his medical condition, of course he's not going to want to stay.
But the doctor wouldn't write you an order or write his medical clinicals out to any other facility,
I had to go through the process of trying to get guardianship over my own husband.
which that's crazy.
Yeah, it was rather expensive.
I started to say cost you out the wazoo.
But in a roundabout way, I went back to the hospital, and I just said, you guys are going to have to admit him somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's not functional.
So were you able to place him after that to another facility?
After we went to the hospital and went through the emergency room,
Mhm.
they placed him in a facility. But,
Got a different doctor's orders.
yeah, but it was,
That's frustrating, and I'm so sorry you went through that.
things like that that pop up. I mean, you don't really even see on the horizon.
Yeah, and it becomes very frustrating. In a scenario like that, what I would have suggested at that point is, one, talking to a different physician, two, talking to a different memory care type of unit. Because memory care and assisted living's different but similar, because you can check yourself in or your loved one can move you in, but with the memory care, because that's a locked unit. And you also have to look at some of these too, is when also you go into like a psych unit or I say psych unit, and that's probably the best way that I can say it for like med management. Like if their medications is all over the place and you've taken them to the hospital because their level of psychosis is all over the place, you have to admit them into like a psych unit if it's not in the hospital to get their medications leveled out before they can discharge. But that I'm so sorry because that sounds wonky.
Yeah, I just took him to the emergency room and I
Yeah.
told him, you don't want him sitting out here with everybody.
No, because he's not safe for himself nor you or anybody else.
There are a lot of situations that you don't even think about. I never thought about having to have guardianship if I had been.
In guardianships, very rarely do we see that they have to have guardianships. I mean, especially with a spouse that's still living. I'm flubbered by this because generally you you have the say. So that's why I'm really
Since he was sitting there saying, I don't want to stay, they said, we can't make him stay unless you have guardianship. And then
but you go to the hospital because then his diagnosis is probably psychosis and we've got an advanced Alzheimer's or dementia, then we can get him placed and you have the okay to do that.
sometimes you really don't have the choice you think you have, because it depends on beds available in the facilities. And then sometimes, they'll put him in a facility. There was many times they put him in a facility and I was there and I'm thinking, no, this isn't right.
Yeah.
Because I didn't like the way they were keeping everybody and then you have to go back to the system again with the doctor to try to find something that,
Right.
is acceptable for the level of care he needs.
Right, right. And with the memory cares, because generally that is a much higher level, and because we typically are not in the right frame of mind to be able to take care of ourselves, even though it's in connection with an assisted living, typically when you get to memory care, it is all inclusive because it's all levels of care at that time. And you can generally, they can stay there even if they have to be fed. The rule of thumb for an assisted living and memory care is they have to be able to do a transfer. They have to be able to either stand, pivot, and take a step to transfer, to be able to be helped to be evacuated out of the building in case of emergency. If it becomes to where they cannot stand, transfer, pivot, then we're looking at SNF, long-term care, because you've got different ratios of care at that point too. With the memory care too, when you move over into the memory care, ask them what their ratio is, what their caregiver to patient ratio. Well, like in ours, I think we had 8 people that lived there, and we had 4 people that worked on that particular floor. And I mean, it's still hard. It is a good ratio, but that was also the company standard. So that's why it's good to always ask what your ratio is, because if they're tight on money and we're a little shaky on our company.
That's a lot better than most I've talked to.
Yeah, I mean, and so I would definitely ask. And something else too that I didn't also talk about, and I didn't even put it on there, and it just hit me, is you can always look on Medicare.gov and you can get the star ratings on facilities. Now, we'll tell you, a lot of times those star ratings aren't necessarily based on your care, it's on the financial side. So it's hard to determine that. But again, you're the advocate. Get on Facebook, Most of them all have a Facebook page, and see how relevant some of the things that are said on there. Look at their reviews. Ask people.
You need to know how much control you have.
Absolutely.
A lot of times you want your loved one down by where the nurse's station is, because then they watch better. If they're down at the farther end of the hallway, they're not being looked after as carefully. And then in some of these facilities, everybody can, that are still mobile, they can get up and walk in between the rooms.
Yeah, they're still wandering. Mm-hmm.
Still wandering, so, the best thing is to make sure that you're down by that nurse's station, because then they're gonna have more eyes on them for a longer period of time. And they can pick up if something's going on, if somebody's in somebody's room, they have to be there. And if there's any problems, you've got a aggressive individual versus, that's shoving somebody else away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things you really have to look at.
And don't send your loved one in there with a lot of valuables. Never. Memory care can range anywhere from 3,500 to 7,000. That's kind of your range. More on the 7,000. I know somebody mentioned James L. West a while ago. Great facility, wonderful. I like it. There are several other different communities around the Metroplex. They do, James L. West does their services based on floors. So you've got your intro to Alzheimer's or dementia on the first floor. They're still in locked unit, but they're on the floor. And then as they advance, they advance to a different type of setting. All looks the same, but those caregivers know what that placement is. There's a couple of other, Autumn Leaves does that over in Fort Worth. There's one in Granbury. There's not any in Weatherford that does that, and none here. But I like the different pods that changes in with the stage that the patient's in.
So Wes names those floors by the rivers in Texas.
Oh, there you go.
5 floors. But they're the only nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
Nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
Profit.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I know of anywhere in this area. And
Very
their
few.
rates- And their rates are a lot more than that.
Yep. But you're yeah, absolutely. And it's extraordinary. I love that building. All of those patients are always taken care of, but not everybody's going to be able to afford that. So there are other facilities that does the pods and the staging. So you can look those up. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that I had to use in taking care of my mother, she progressed and it wasn't Alzheimer's, it was just health.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved her into a private home care where the woman had 2 patients or 2 individual elderly people that she took care of. And somebody recommended her and I checked her out and she was good. But is there a list with the state private in-home care?
Mm-mm. No, there's not a list, and actually there's going to be some changes to that coming up in 2026 because it's non-regulated. I could go out and buy a house tomorrow and I could start doing that business. They're out there. To find them, very difficult.
They're very expensive.
Yes.
But
Your ratios, yeah.
2 to 1.
Yeah, your ratios are fabulous there. So definitely you'd have to do your research to find those. I couldn't even list all of the ones that I actually know of, and I accidentally found them. So they're not going to be on Google. So definitely it's an option. long-term care living facilities, whenever I was talking about you've got to be able to stand and pivot, and we've got to be able to transfer for the evacuation. Whenever that becomes a issue and you're not able to do that anymore, you start looking at long-term care facilities. That's still going to be like your Springtown Park. That is also, they've got Azle Manor. They've got what's the other one? Eagle. Yeah, I was like, I couldn't think of it. But they're going to have a rehab side, and they're going to have a long-term care facility side. So those are all under one roof. And you can go there for long-term care, but that's going to be under private pay. Okay? So that's a difference between your rehab, and we've accelerated out of the memory care or the assisted living or the independent living, and then you're going to be private paying at a SNF, we call it, and those rates can run 180 to 200 and up, and that's per day. If that's not an option too, and a lot of these places will have people that can talk to you and try to help navigate, but I'd rather do it in the beginning stages than at the end, and kind of know what our game plan is, because then this is where you start running into Medicaid pending, what beds are available, is it a private room, is it a shared room, and your prices change in. Same thing goes on all of these. Pop in, never schedule, because you want them kind of caught off guard. I mean, if they're having an emergency, seeing who's hands on, who's helping with them, how fast did it take for the ambulance to get there? You can sit there and watch, but that's going to indicate your care. So this is where you fall into like Medicaid pending. That's generally what they generally only have a portion of their beds that are Medicaid beds. And when you go into Medicaid pending beds, you either go onto a list when you first move in there, because you might have a spin down period. And spin down periods, have y'all already talked about that? That's where if mama or you or whomever only has, let's say, $70,000 in the bank, and you don't have any other assets to take care of that, you're going to spend down that $70,000 until there's a certain amount that you can have, because then you apply for what's called Medicaid, and then you have that vesting period, and then they're going to take, I think it's like $60 out of the Social Security check that goes to the nursing home, and you can get into a Medicaid bed. But that's pretty difficult around. I mean, that's a wait list. I mean, and to try to find a bed that's available at the time that you need it, it's pretty hard to find. Who had a question? I saw somebody's hand raised. Nobody?
That's not a single room bed either.
Mm-mm.
You're going to be in a two-bed room
Yes, sir.
when you get to that point.
Yes, sir.
But what do you recommend?
As far as what?
A semi-private or a private?
It's not a matter of what I recommend. It's going to be basically what you can financially pay. I mean, because if you're paying private duty and you're able to pay for it, a private room, great.
So if I ask the Janesville West people, in particular Holly, she says semi-private.
Really? Because it's cheaper? Because you get that socialization. I could see that.
People, you've been typically at home with people,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And some people prefer the isolation because they've already been. That's good. That's good to know. Cause me, give me my room by myself and my dog. So I know. I mean, that's a lot of information on that continuum of care. It's a lot, but I would definitely, be prepared. Know what's available. Know what you like that's around the community. What's available for you out here in Springtown. Because it matters. And whenever you're trying to make that decision, and you maybe only having 2 hours to make that decision, where are we going? Because we're discharging. It's good to kind of already know. Yeah, and that's right. That's right. And the other thing is too about and I'll say about all of them, and I'm not taking up for all of them, not. But no facility is perfect. Find the one that stinks the less. I mean, I'd say another word, but
I'm gonna say visit at different times of the day.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I say pop in. Pop in, visit different people. I mean, at this life stage, you probably already have people that may be in rehab, that may be doing some rehab stints. Go visit them.
Another thing you need to be aware of is make sure that not anybody can just walk in
Mm-hmm.
and steal from rooms.
Yep.
Have somebody. Everyone I went in had codes to get in. Yeah.
A lot of them do, and a lot of them have open doors. But like I said, a lot of that is going to be changing in 26. It's all being discussed right now. There's so much that's changing. And so it's going to be interesting to see if not all of them end up having to do that just for security reasons, which I don't mind it. I mean, we live in a crazy world.
People can walk in my mother's case, a lady walked in a, quote, medical uniform with a stethoscope around her neck and stole her credit card. And went to Walmart and charged a whole bunch of stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's frustrating. Yes, ma'am.
We had a lady that, she shouldn't have been living on her own as much as she did. And I was taking her to her doctor's appointments, and I finally asked the doctors, I said, should she be living on her own? And they said no. All her doctors said no, she shouldn't be living on her own. So they wrote us letters stating that, she was in no condition to take care of herself. And that made a big difference when we went to Springtown Park to go ahead and see what they could do to help her.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of different requirements, like the situation that she was in. That's a totally different facility, and that's something that I'm like, that's crazy. I mean, because we had spouses that was checking into our memory care at Martin Crest a lot, and they didn't want to be there. I don't know anybody that wants to be moved in to a facility. I mean, even when they cognitively even know that they need to be there, but they still don't want to go there. But I mean, it was for their own safety. So knowing what your ins and outs and what's required of different facilities, it's huge. And, I'll mention this too. If you have loved ones, or, this is church group, if you have people that doesn't have family, that's why I've already named my nephew that, bless his heart, he's going to have to take care of me whenever I get older. Have they talk to them, ask them, who's going to help you? Do they know that they're going to be responsible for you? Because I will tell you right now, if that time comes whenever you can't be placed or can't be relied to living alone because you're a safety hazard to yourself or to others. Um, like if we came in with home health and we saw that and we call APS, that's Adult Protective Services, there's not a whole lot they can do either if you don't have family. So you've got to have somebody that knows that they're going to help you transition and what your wishes are. So, be prepared, help those out, because if I didn't do it now, I'd be in a world of hurt. My sisters would kick me out. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. My husband and I have been considering, moving into Fort Worth to independent living.
Mm-hmm.
Our only child lives in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a listing somewhere available of independent living?
I mean, you can Google independent livings. I mean, a lot of them are, yeah, they're huge. There's a lot of big ones.
I know that Tavola Park, the Sushi Soleil on Tavola Park, the doctors down there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the one I know of.
There's Vantage that's over off of Brian Irving. I mean, they have independent living. They have a memory care. No, they have independent living, assisted living, and memory care. So they've got all three of them. And there's a lot of them that do that.
I don't see that we're progressing to those at the moment.
Yeah, but it makes it easier.
Yeah, oh, sure.
I mean, because they already have all of your information and stuff. So I prefer those. I mean, that's going to be something that I would prefer personally, just because it's also easier on the mind and the cognition whenever you start doing those changes. But there's tons of them. You can look up independent livings. Oh Lordy, because there's several, and there's several out in Keller. There's okay.
I'm looking at Fort Worth.
Okay. Well, and you've got, Legends there in Azle, and there's actually one that's in Willow Park in Weatherford now. It's called the Reserve, and so there's a lot of them that are out there, and they range big, small, little. Yes, sir.
I was gonna make a comment on, you made a comment a while ago about VA benefits and being boots on the ground. There are several different levels of military service that you can get.
Mm-hmm.
And I would recommend that anybody that is involved with the military get a military advocate to help them with that, because it's just there's just so much involved in that.
Yeah, the packet's huge.
Boots on the ground if you're in the Navy.
Yeah, and it's different branches, and that's why I'd always recommend going to the VA, the people that actually deal with that. Yes, sir, Donnie.
His name is John Hale.
He's still there.
Yeah, he's the oldest bird.
I love him.
He's so knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
And there are benefits for spouses as well.
Yes, I forgot about that. Mm-hmm. Great avenue. Whenever I worked for Martin Crest, that would be some of the first things that I would ask the people that were looking was, did you or your spouse serve in our military? And I would say, go apply, because you don't know. I mean, they can always say no. But if you're missing out on those benefits, right?
The other part of the problem is with the VA, because I checked into that with my husband, and they had a facility in Paris, Texas. So, that he could go to, and it's like, if you think one, I'm gonna let the VA take care of it.
And that's the difference between your VA owned and most of your independent and memory care units will work. That's a great question to ask, is if they work with the VA benefits. Most of them do, because all it is that you've already filled out that paperwork, and then the facility has to fill out theirs of the date that they move in, and then they have that vesting period, and that you pay privately until those benefits kick in. But yeah, that's a great question to ask. You got any other questions for me?
Little bitty question.
Yes, ma'am.
State rate independent living, or do they inspect them? That is truly like living in an apartment. Okay. Kind of like
Reviews.
reviews and eyeballs.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? And I've got cards up here. Yes, I work in home health, but if you have a question, I mean, you can ask Donnie. I'm happy to help. I mean, if it's questions, or hey, I checked into this particular place, or I'm going to have to do rehab and I want to be over closer to my daughter that's over in, let's say, Coppell. I'll find out from the rep over there which ones are good. So I can find out the info. So if you'd like a card, you're more than welcome to have one. Yes, sir.
My wife's father was in the Army, World War II, was wounded. When we needed to buy out a facility for him, the VA paid 100% of everything.
Wow, that's good.
They took care of everything. He didn't retire. He was out 5 years, and he was out, and the VA took care of it all.
That's wonderful.
If you have individual questions, you're welcome to come up to Shirley when we're done. Okay, and thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
See you next week.